The new season of Denmark's Wilderness Alone has arrived, this time set on a lake within the Arctic Circle. 8 contestants will face a wilderness survival challenge here. The one who lasts the longest will win a prize of 3 million. Gio, one of the contestants, is no survival expert. He simply teaches kayaking at a university and enjoys taking his kids outdoors when bored, considering nature the best playground for them. It's not only inexpensive, but also enhances father-child bonds and teaches survival skills. With the school on winter break, Gio decided to test his limits and potentially win the prize money to travel with his family. Upon entering, Gio was very excited, despite the light rain causing him a headache. He couldn't understand why the show chose a rainy day and hurried to build a shelter to avoid getting soaked. By the end of the day, he had nearly met his goal of having a place to sleep. Food would depend on his luck. Gio's ability to endure hunger wasn't strong. Other than gaining weight beforehand, he planned to set fishing nets early, hoping to catch a fish daily. However, the increasing rain and water-filled boots made him uncomfortably cold. To catch fish, he had to stretch the net to the other side of the bay using a rope that was too short, forcing him to enter the cold water. After setting the net, he quickly changed back into dry clothes. Whether the net would catch any fish remained to be seen. The next day, Gio checked the net, unsure of its effectiveness due to the apparent lack of fish in the area. Surprisingly, the catch was better than expected. He found fish in the net, securing his food for the next 2 days. After failing to start a fire due to the rain-soaked wood, he resorted to eating raw fish, which turned out to be quite satisfying. Despite preferring cooked meat, without a fire at night, even the strongest body could only endure so much. He hoped to get a fire going soon, and to check on how the other contestants were faring. Astrid, another contestant, struggled with the rain from the start. She ventured into the jungle with her equipment and quickly set up a shelter using a waterproof sheet as a tent. Unexpectedly, she injured her hand within half an hour and complained about the unsafe equipment provided by the show. Fortunately, the wound wasn't severe, and she managed with minimal first aid. She collected some birch bark nearby and successfully started a fire, which helped dry her off. Rasmus next door really hates rainy days as it severely affects his wilderness survival here. He thinks the show's crew is crazy for not choosing slightly better weather. He left all his stuff on the open ground and didn't bother moving it elsewhere, so he just made do and built a shelter there. Rasmus is an engineer who usually drives around during his days off. His car has everything and is like his second home. He also has a secret workshop for tool sharpening, and he brought modified equipment for this challenge. Rasmus used to be a scout soldier, so his physical condition is definitely up to par. However, he has never tried to stay alone in the Arctic Circle for so long. The challenge is not small for Rasmus. Now, he just wants to quickly build a shelter to block the rain. After fixing the logs to the trees, he can spread a waterproof sheet over them. Still, it feels damp inside, and lying directly on it could definitely lead to hypothermia. He needs to figure out how to start a fire to dry off and warm up with a pot of hot water, as he really doesn't want to drink cold water. Fortunately, the rain stopped the next day. Rasmus slept very uncomfortably, and now all he can think about is starting a fire to boil some hot water. Unfortunately, there isn't much dry material, and after several attempts, he had to give up. He also brought a fishing net. The bay here is not very large, and it only takes a little effort to throw it to the other side. He just took a stick and tied the fishing net there. To prevent the stick from being blown down by the wind, he had to move a lot of stones to fix it on top. This way, he could rest easy. He is a bit worried that if the fish are caught and he hasn't managed to start a fire, he might just have to eat them raw. Burke is the oldest contestant in this challenge, a retired veteran with experience in various dangerous places. He already doesn't have as much stamina as the other contestants, and starting in the rain has completely soaked him, which is really bad for him. His first task is to quickly build a shelter to block the rain. However, the place chosen by the show is not good at all. The rocks underneath are uncomfortable to lie on. No choice but to take his things and move a bit further, to a place that seems a bit more suitable next door. Burke's shelter seems to be the worst so far, looking like it could be blown away at any moment. He doesn't know what to do next and becomes very irritable. As the wind outside grows stronger, even though Burke hides inside the shelter, he can feel the rain seeping in. Now, he can't even collect materials to start a fire, and somehow his underwear has split, feeling extremely cold at the bottom. He has only managed to make a half-finished stove, which seems like it won't be used for a while. It was hard to get through the first night, and waking up, he found the sleeping bag in even worse condition, with hardly a dry spot. Burke regrets choosing that place to build his shelter. He thinks about collecting materials to rebuild a shelter. Just setting up the frame and covering it with a waterproof sheet feels like an improvement. After reorganizing and cleaning up, it's much better than the temporary shelter. As long as no more heavy rain pours in, he is confident he can stay here until the end. Next, we need to consider the food issue. Burke doesn't know if he's feeling ill from the cold or just too tired. His headache is so severe he has thought about calling a doctor several times, but he doesn't want to go home so soon. He at least wants to catch and taste some fish before considering leaving. Eddie had been very excited about this place even before the challenge started. He wasn't thinking about winning the $3 million prize. He just hoped to get more camera time to show off to his friends and family. Upon landing, Eddie felt the warmth of this place, as if the wind would blow him away, compounded by the ongoing rain that quickly dampened his clothes. He found a spot for a temporary shelter. Starting a fire in the humid environment proved too difficult, even with a lighter. Despite several attempts to ignite the birch bark, Eddie couldn't manage it. Though he wanted to give up and just lie down, it was too cold, so he kept trying to start the fire over and over. It's unclear how long Eddie was at it, but he finally succeeded in getting a fire going. He won't have to worry about waking up from the cold tonight. Another contestant, Yetta, lives on an island and is very familiar with the changing weather. This might be her advantage over the others. Upon disembarking, she was in no rush and took some time to enjoy the nearby scenery. She loves being in nature, feeling it calms her down. Yetta has never tried to spend this long outdoors, which she finds exciting. Now she needs to set up her shelter properly to avoid soaking her gear. She underestimated the harshness of the environment. Even inside the shelter, it still feels cold. She urgently needs some dry materials to start a fire for warmth. Yetta usually spends her free time horseback riding in the wilderness, enjoying the freedom. Her survival skills were taught by her father, and she hopes they will be useful here. Yetta isn't setting high expectations for this challenge. She just doesn't want to be the first to leave. However, those who usually set such goals tend to be the first to go. Her attempts at starting a fire haven't been very successful due to the moisture, so she might need to wait a bit longer. As soon as Lars entered the game, he felt extremely cold. He really dislikes rainy and windy weather. Watching the crew's boat getting farther away made him feel even lonelier. Now, he needs to quickly set up his shelter, which might be the most standard among all the contestants. He has managed to use the materials wisely and lives comfortably. I am quite optimistic about his performance going forward. Most contestants don't have a fire to keep warm at night and can only wear all their clothes to stay somewhat warm. Besides worrying about food, they also start to miss living with their families. It seems that this batch of contestants might not stay long. A few already look like they might quit soon. The competition has reached its third day, and contestants are gradually adapting to the environment. Some are already enjoying a feast of fish, happily eating so much that they even swallow the bones, perhaps due to the fish being delicious or their extreme hunger. Rasmus, for example, has had some success with his fishing net, catching a large trout that almost made him cry out of craving. He prefers cooked to raw fish, and now the meat smells even more delicious, juicy with every bite. Although he has food to fill his stomach, Rasmus finds the place extremely boring due to the absence of anyone to talk to. Initially, he thought contestants left because they felt lonely, which seemed fake, but now he understands that feeling himself. He plans to keep busy by building a platform on the shore, recalling his scouting days, which he misses and cherishes. Meanwhile, Astrid, braving the rain, checked her fishing net by the shore. It's her first time handling a fishing net, and she's unsure of the outcome. Surprisingly, despite her lack of experience and a big hole in the net due to improper placement, she manages to catch 3 fish. Repairing the net will take her about 4 hours, much more tiring than setting it, making her seriously doubt the quality of the nets and consider giving a bad review. Eddie has completely covered himself due to the abundance of mosquitoes at night, which keep buzzing in his ears, disturbing his sleep and causing him discomfort and a slight cough. With no food yet, he relies on drinking hot water to ease his hunger. Despite being a zoo feeder, Eddie lacks fishing skills and hoped his Viking ancestry might help. But 3 days in, his stomach is growling with hunger. The food available nearby is scarce, just some berries to slightly curb cravings. These aren't enough to fill the stomach. Eddie still needs to find more food. The reason for the few berries is that a bear recently visited the area. There's bear feces not far from the camp, left at an unknown time. Eddie sarcastically thanks the show for choosing such a great location. Eddie tried using a small float to make fishing easier by pulling the line to the other side of the water. If he could anchor it in deeper waters, he might catch more fish, which would determine how long he stays. However, after a lot of effort, he only managed about 10 meters, and the water often pushed it back to shore. It didn't seem reliable at all. Eddie had no solution but to stand there waiting for the wind to help, eventually losing patience and unwilling to continue. Sana's fishing net didn't catch any fish either, and she didn't know what went wrong. Theoretically, there should have been a fish or two. Besides hunger, she felt very lonely, and often thought about going home to her family. She tried adding some buoyancy to the net to stabilize it in the water, but wasn't sure of the outcome, as she rarely used nets for fishing. She randomly chose a spot to throw the net, and just as she was about to spread it out, a strong wind came up. The net quickly hit the rocks, frustrating her. It would have been better if it had happened a few minutes later. Now, not only could she not set the net properly, she had to bring it back to check for damage. Back at the camp, Sana was still very angry. She considered building a small boat and attaching some hooks to spread the net along the edge, which would require significant effort, especially in repairing the wood. Fortunately, she had learned this from a master before coming here, never expecting to use it in this situation. Thinking of everyone's encouragement, she couldn't help but cry. She was not a survival expert, but a kayak enthusiast who had won many awards since childhood. If she could have brought a kayak, she would feel more secure. She loved challenging her limits, but now felt a bit like backing out. She didn't expect the boat to be so small. Others might think it was just garbage. However, Sana was quite satisfied with it, though unsure of its performance. She just dragged it into the water and walked around, finding this spot slightly better. She threw the boat into the water, hoping it would automatically drift to the other side, but it had no effect at all, even worse than just throwing the net across. After several disappointing attempts and wasting much time and effort, Sana was furious. She thought about taking it back to burn as firewood. It was a failed attempt, and her stomach was even hungrier. She wondered how the other contestants were doing, assuming they were also struggling with hunger. The fishing net was really awkward to use. She suggested the show provide something simpler next time. If she doesn't find food soon, she feels like she might be the next contestant to leave. Yeta's situation is even worse. She couldn't even start a fire. Still, she needs to find food, even if it means eating it raw. She plans to use the loop on her gloves to create a rope drive, making it easier to haul in the net from the shore. It's not very difficult, but she's unsure about the effectiveness. Yeta has already put the rope in the water, and just walking a short distance makes her breathless. Hunger greatly affects her body. After some adjustments, she successfully sets up the fishing net, but catches no fish, which makes her more anxious. Let's see how Burke is doing. He feels both hungry and tired, almost ready to collapse. Drizzle makes it inconvenient to set the net by the shore. He would like to cross the river to find food but fears slipping into the water. If he were a few years younger, he might risk it. Although not as physically strong as the other contestants, his rich experience helps him survive outdoors. However, he often finds himself reminiscing and does not enjoy feeling lonely. The environment is worse than expected. He wishes he had delayed joining the competition. With nothing entertaining, he passes time by scraping bark from trees. By the fourth day, Burke is so hungry he doesn't want to talk, hoping the net might catch a fish. Even a small one would be great. It rains daily. His clothes never dry, and his headache worsens. The environment is unfriendly. He tries to pull the rope to the other side, where the water flow is strong. Burke breathes quietly and walks slowly. He starts well and quickens his pace to the other side without mishaps. He hopes to catch fish this time. Enjoying the lakeside scenery, he reminisces about living with his family and wishes they could see this. Talking about it makes his eyes moist. He wishes he could return and embrace his family. Not knowing what else to say, he just sits quietly. Another day passes, and Burke survives on some berries. Today he sees a fish in the net, which instantly lifts his spirits. It seems small, But he quickly retrieves the net and catches the fish. He feels there might be more fish in the net, but when he tries to pull it up, it gets stuck. Frustrated and unable to pull it up even with brute force, he has no choice but to go back for a pole. In his haste, Burke accidentally falls on rocks, crying out in pain and struggling to breathe. Unable to move normally, he calls the show's crew, feeling he might have broken a bone. The situation is worse than expected, with potential internal injuries. For safety, Burke is sent to the hospital. He thought he would be revitalized by eating fish, but instead, he has to leave the competition due to his injuries. Burke feels complex emotions. He doesn't think he lost, just that he was unlucky. He's sent away before he can even pack his bags. The Wilderness Solo Challenge has only reached day 5, and one contestant has already quit. While everyone else is still worrying about food, Gio has mastered survival here. His fishing net catches enough food every time. Today he caught 7 fish. He feels more energetic with each meal and considers upgrading his shelter. He plans to leave space for a chimney so he can stay warm and comfortable by the fire at night. First, he sets up the fireplace, tidies up the ground a bit, and stacks up stones. Gathering materials from the shore takes a lot of effort. With Gio's continuous hard work, the structure of the fireplace gradually improves. He fills the gaps with some mud, confident in his craftsmanship. During material collection, he finds some cotton, a great kindling. A click of his lighter easily ignites it, and he tests it in the fireplace. Soon the shelter fills with smoke, proving he needs to build the chimney first. The smoke chokes him, and he rushes out. The fireplace still needs improvement, which frustrates Gio. Now, he must wait for the smoke to clear. Meanwhile, Lars considers what to do with some planks. Removing the nails seems a good idea. He enjoys outdoor activities and wishes he could live outdoors every day, often taking his children climbing. He hopes to connect more with nature through this challenge. After removing the nails, he quickly turns a plank into a stool. The finished product looks quite good, and he now has a place to sit in his shelter. Lars is very pleased, though it's a pity he didn't manage to get some food to eat there. He collects some plants from the shore to make tea, which temporarily eases his hunger, though it tastes a bit odd. Eddie is doing slightly better, at least managing to find some berries. He looks for mushrooms in the jungle but only finds small ones. Resources here are scarce, and he worries about bears. It might be better to move to a place with more resources so he can upgrade his shelter. Setting up the fishing net is troublesome until he spots a reindeer nearby. Unfortunately, the show rules forbid hunting, so he can only watch the deer wander around. If he could get some meat, he could last several more days. His previous attempt to use a wooden board to spread the net didn't work well. This time, he tries a different method and walks back and forth along the shore to find a good spot to throw the net far. Finally, he has hope of catching fish. After spending another day on his shelter, he has everything set up nicely. It's time to check the fishing net. It seems he hasn't caught much, but as he gathers the net, he suddenly laughs. After such a long time, he finally catches a fish. Although not large, having some meat is already quite good. Eddie wishes he could swallow the fish right there. He feels his fishing net is effective again and takes the fish back for cooking. It's been so long since he smelled meat. Even without any seasoning, the flavor is great. He eats the meat directly with his hands. If he could eat a fish like this every day, Eddie feels he could stay until the show runs out of money, which seems not too difficult. The camera shifts to Astrid as she plans to build a new shelter. First, she needs to take down 2 trees, which turn out to be heavier than expected. Just transporting them back is exhausting. She'll need many more materials like these, at least 3 or 4 more trees. Astrid usually enjoys cycling wildly into the wilderness, finding comfort in the breeze of nature. Unfortunately, since joining the competition, she hasn't had the chance to do so. Her home is stocked with tools for overnight stays in the wild, having visited many diverse places, but she finds the Arctic Circle to be the most challenging. It's been a long time since she last tasted food. While walking along the shore, she finds a wooden board. Despite some damage, it still looks usable and might be reworked. She hauls it back, the journey rough, feeling like a mix of a fitness routine. Initially, she planned to put something on it to step on, but eventually found that climbing quickly was better. The tarp is spread out and now covers the top, making it much more comfortable inside, where she can jump around without issues. However, she still needs some long poles for rain protection. Besides the floating boards she finds on the shore, she occasionally finds driftwood, saving her the effort of cutting down trees, though transporting them is very tiring. It takes about 7 or 8 trips to move everything. The workload today is more than all previous days combined. Her stomach has been growling with hunger. She barely manages to construct the shelter, now ready to pack everything and move it over. Finally, she covers the surface with some branches. Everyone wonders how many points this shelter would score. Anyway, Astrid is very satisfied with her new home and now needs to consider how to collect more food. On the other hand, Rasmus seems less concerned. His shelter still looks poor. Now he goes to check if there are any fish. He managed to catch some fish in the past few days, but the size and quantity were disappointing. He wishes he could catch more. He quickly arrives at the fishing net to check and sees a fish caught in it. He goes over and pulls it up to see only a small fish, feeling somewhat helpless. If he could catch a bigger fish, he would feel more confident about staying. He can only stand there, hoping a fish would jump up. But unfortunately, nothing happens. His stomach continues to growl with hunger. He can only drink more water to stave off the hunger. There are some small fruits on the nearby grass, barely satisfying his craving. The fishing net doesn't always catch fish, and he considers whether to move to a different spot. Staying here seems unpromising. After returning to the camp, Rasmus was already low on energy. He felt he had little chance of making it to the end, now just hoping to last one day at a time. His body was extremely tired, but he still forced himself to go outside. Today, he managed to catch a small fish in his net, which was still jumping around. He seriously doubted the local feng shui, wondering why he could only catch small fish. There were no better spots available, and he had no idea when he would have enough fish to fill a pot. He would have to eat these fish anyway, or he might faint from hunger. Once back at camp, he could cook them. Although it was not much, it would be enough to somewhat fill his stomach. Yetta, on the other hand, was in a worse situation. She hadn't managed to catch any fish and could only nibble on some berries. Her spirits were still okay, though. She checked her net daily, expecting to come back empty-handed, but surprisingly found a fish as big as a hand, which was quite good. Behind the net, there were a few more fish, finally allowing her to have a decent meal. She couldn't describe how happy she felt, with as many as 10 fish laid out, ensuring she wouldn't go hungry for a while. She immediately took them back to the camp to cook. It had been a long time since she had tasted meat. Yetta loved the feel of grease on her lips and felt she could cook a few more fish without issues. She accidentally ate more than half of them and ate part of the remaining 3. Now, she was so full she couldn't eat anymore. At least for the next few days, she wouldn't feel hungry. She was very satisfied, hoping to catch as many fish the next day and have another good meal. After enjoying the nourishment from the fish, Yetta decided to set up a tent to live more comfortably. This was quite exhausting, especially since she had no experience in setting up tents. The space turned out to be too small, and she could only enter by squatting. She got lost in thought, then decided to try covering it with a tarp to see if that would help. It was very troublesome. The frame couldn't even hold up. She felt she had no talent for this. Although she wasn't very hungry, her body felt tired. She didn't know where she had lost her gloves, and her memory was starting to fail. She felt she was indeed old and not well suited to this life. Despite having eaten so much food, she still felt life here was too difficult. The hardest part was waking up in the middle of the night to temperatures of only a few degrees, shivering with cold each time she went out. Life was too uncomfortable. It was clear she couldn't build a proper shelter. She could only tidy up her small tent to make it a bit more comfortable. She began to miss the days of living with her family. Staying here was getting harder by the day. Rather than torturing herself further, it would be better to go back and reunite with her family. With that, she called the show's crew to announce her withdrawal. When I saw Yetta catch 10 fish, I thought she could last a bit longer. However, she ran into problems with the shelter. If she had learned to build one before coming, she could have stayed for a few more weeks at least. Yetta was quite reluctant to leave, but this was no longer the life she wanted. In the end, she left on the cruise boat. It's uncertain how much longer the remaining contestants can last. In the wilderness, the most important food is fish. Those who catch more can stay longer. Astrid has adapted to the local fish and uses just one net to haul in a bunch of them. Counting them, she has 20 sizable fish, ensuring she won't go hungry. If she conserves, she could last several more weeks. She plans to clean all the fish and grill the fattier ones. While cooking, she will fix up her shelter's bed, which is uncomfortable and inconvenient to assemble. It has nearly collapsed several times. Originally, she intended to replace just the legs but ended up stabilizing it with a pile of wood blocks to prevent it from falling apart during the night. Now she can finally eat well and sleep comfortably. Next door, Gio has also caught plenty of fish. He enjoys soaking in the water to relax. Life now is not very stressful for him, though he misses days spent with his family. Meanwhile, Lars is busy working on a wooden stool, hoping to make it more comfortable by raising its height. Sitting low is not ideal, and the saw is getting dull, making wood cutting a time-consuming task. After raising the stool, sitting feels much more comfortable, though he has less food. Tonight, he only has one fish to cook. Life is not going very well for him, and he is unsure what to do next. Watching the fish stew over the fire, the camera moves to Sana. On the slope, there are plenty of berries. If no fish are caught in her net, she can stay there eating berries for a day. However, as the weather gets colder, berries will not be available. She wants to move her tent to a new shelter, but lacks the energy to do so. It has been a long time since she saw a fish in her net. Checking the shore as usual, she sees no movement in the net. This situation is not favorable, and her stomach is already growling from hunger, fearing she might be forced to leave the competition due to weight loss. Food is her biggest problem. Just when she thought she'd go hungry again today, she spots something moving in the net. A fish, not as big as her palm, but enough to ease her hunger a bit. The weather is too cold now, her hands trembling so much that she struggles to process the fish, worried she might accidentally cut herself. Currently, she can only shake her hands to prevent her fingers from getting too cold. As soon as the situation improves slightly, she quickly takes out a lighter to start a fire and warm up. Sana is not very skilled with these tools and struggles to ignite the fire for a long time, constantly complaining as her fingers nearly freeze. She forces herself to keep trying, unsure how long she's been attempting. Finally, she manages to light the fire and hurriedly cooks the fish, having not eaten meat in a long time. The smell is particularly enticing, and she eats it directly with her hands. The meal doesn't provide much energy, and she needs to stay active to keep warm. Despite the fire burning nearby, her toes still feel cold. She hasn't eaten enough today and feels her body weakening. With no other option, she tries to warm up by making a spoon from a wooden block, though her fingers are not as nimble as before, and it takes more time to complete. Staying at the campsite only tires her mentally. Sana plans to take her luggage and explore the mountains nearby. She might not find anything, but the thrill of adventure excites her. Not far into her journey, she sees reindeer and hears the sound of running water, stopping to drink a cup of sweet but cold water that nearly freezes her teeth. Sana drinks a lot of water here, which allows her to travel further. She is eager to enjoy the view above, instantly feeling better. Although she hasn't eaten any food along the way, the beautiful scenery is enough for her. She is reluctant to leave but decides to return to make a fire and warm up as the wind is strong above. Her physical strength is probably low, hoping not to faint halfway. Before dark, Sana returns safely to the shelter, but there is nothing to eat inside, and her stomach feels even hungrier. The fishing net has not caught any more food. Her good mood has now vanished. Had she known, she would have collected more berries. She misses the days of eating with her family and feels hungry and tired here. If one day the fishing net stops catching fish, she doesn't know how many days she can last. The challenge has reached the 12th day. Eddie has lost a lot of weight compared to when he first arrived. He is not very satisfied with his fishing net, as the wind often blows it to the shore, greatly affecting the catch. There is nothing much he can do about this situation, only hoping that the wind comes after he catches fish. Today, it seems there are fish caught in the net. He immediately checks it, and thankfully, there are 2 fish, providing more energy than he has expended. This trip he has caught 7 fish in total, though they are a bit small. Cooking all of them should just about fill his stomach. Eddie feels that fishing will become more difficult later on. If he could eat better earlier, he might endure hunger for a few more days later. Now, he needs to make a fire and cook the fish. After some effort, the fish becomes very fragrant. He tastes it directly from his mouth and feels revitalized. After eating and drinking, he immediately crawls into his sleeping bag to rest. Waking up the next day, he notices the temperature dropping even more. Eddie wishes he could just lie down and rest, but there's still much to do. Usually, he uses charcoal as toothpaste. Although it doesn't smell good, it cleans very well. He plans to keep some at home in the future. After caring for his teeth, Eddie goes to check the fishing net by the coast. The net is still performing well. At least there will be meat to eat today. However, his body has become very weak, feeling like no amount of food could replenish his strength. This might be due to only eating fish and berries. He might not last much longer. Nearby, there are some junipers from which he can make tea to get some vitamins. When bored, he carves things with a knife to relax a bit. As the waves grow stronger, Eddie feels good about the net's catch, but it's painful when his fingers touch the cold water. If possible, he really wouldn't want to endure this.